Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for this month's L&D Fix with First. As always, my name's Tom. I'll be your host today, and joining me today is Carolyn Shepherd. Carolyn, thank you so much for taking the time to come and join us on the L&D Fix.
Oh, I'm delighted. Thanks very much for the opportunity, Tom. I'm delighted to join you.
Well, yeah, it's going to be a really interesting chat, but as always, we want to meet you where you are in your AI journey. So please do be active in the chat. I'm not going to start off by asking you where you're joining from today or what the weather's like. So instead, whilst we're doing introductions, I would love for you to jump in the chat and let us know what was the last thing you used AI for. Now, it doesn't have to be work related. It might be that you were just using Google Maps or whatever it is that you're using it for today. But what did you last use AI for? Drop it in the chat while we're just getting started so we know where everyone's at in terms of their usage. But with that in mind, Carolyn, who are you? And what do you do in the world of L&D and HR and AI?
Okay, well, thanks very much, Tom, for the invitation to join you and your wonderful audience. I'm very much looking forward to it. Who am I? That's a really good question. I was just saying to you earlier that I'm constantly changing my title. I'm currently AI architect, and frankly, that's just because this area that we're in is just moving so fast, So I keep changing my title a little bit. So probably better to tell you about the squiggly career very quickly, and that is employment law, barrister, HR, then into HR tech, then into AI, and here I am. So that's why that's a connection, because people will say, oh, that's a really interesting background. You've got the HR, you've got the law, and you've got the technology, which is unusual. So, but that's why I have. I've had a couple of national awards this year, which I've been delighted about, the AI 100 UK Leaders List, and also the HR Magazine's in most influential thinkers, but there's 11 before me. So, I'm not getting carried away.
Shocking.
Also,
That's outrageous.
I also do LinkedIn Learning tutor work on AI, and I work with clients. I've just started a Substack, as you know. It was lovely because you greeted me. You sent me a message and said, "Glad you've come over to Substack to see us here," which is nice. It's a very different environment, and I'm really thoroughly enjoying it.
Fantastic. So, when this topic came up, this is a topic that a lot of people who've been joining our sessions have been asking for, and it was like, without any sort of hesitation, the biggest topic in the small
Mm.
and medium business survey that Thirst did about, what are we looking at in the world of L&D and HR right now? And this was absolutely top of the list. And throughout the session, as I say, I really want to get into, for those listening, what you're using AI for and how we can help. What questions you've got. What are you struggling with, or what are you worrying about? What do you feel like you don't know enough about? And maybe we can help you bridge some of those gaps. But I'd love to get started with what you're seeing in the space right now, Carolyn, because I mean, it still feels like not that long ago, AI was an incredibly fringe conversation in the industry. There were maybe 3 or 4 vendors, each big conference going, oh, yes, we're using AI to do this, that, or the next thing. And everyone kind of went, okay, I don't really get it. And then in the matter of the last, 4 or 5 years at this point, it's become this huge conversation. And I think a lot of us are still struggling with that speed of change that we're perhaps not always used to in our industry. So on the ground, when you look around today, what are you seeing? And what in that is kind of things that you're really pleased that you're seeing? And what are you seeing that maybe you're less sold on or perhaps even a little concerned about?
Yeah, okay. Well, that's a really broad question. So I'll just talk for the next hour, shall I? Okay, I'm going to try and just condense that a little bit, Tom. And what I'll say, thank you for the question, because it's so broad ranging that I can really sort of get into that. I would say, first of all, that like you and your findings, and I know that you talk about the AI efficiency trap, I'm very much finding that as well, where you've got 83% adoption, but with low confidence in outcomes, and that's really quite worrying. And I think that's indicative of what I'm seeing as well. I would say I'm definitely seeing that, but it's because I think you have two tiers of what's going on with AI. You've got the frontier firms and all the money that's going into it. I don't know how it's going to play out for them. I'm not saying it's better, but that's what's happening there. There's a lot of concentration on it. You're hearing these mandates from the CEOs saying use AI or leave. And then you've got the rest of us, the normal people, the real people who are sort of like dealing with everyday life in smaller businesses. Perhaps we're not in the top 100 or something like that. And so we're dealing with an adoption. It's faster than anything we've ever seen before. We're not getting the support maybe from places that we should within the organization. We're not getting the budgets for the adoption training. And that's very worrying to me. I've heard people even saying, which is quite extraordinary. Okay, look, this was a year ago, and it's probably changed a lot now. But an L&D, well, CLO, who will remain nameless, obviously, told me and a group of people there that they were just basically buying licenses, Copilot licenses for people, and saying, "Get on with it." Well, isn't that a bit of a problem for L&D? I mean, don't we have a bigger purpose than that, or a bigger role to play? And this person said, "Well, the thing is, everyone's using it at home anyway, so they're getting to use it. They're getting to know how to use it. So they're almost leading the field, really. Basically the tail's wagging the dog."
Mm.
That was not great, and we've learned that's not a good approach because you have shadow AI, you have people showing their colleagues and peers how to do things the wrong way, and another thing that I see, which is extraordinary to me, there are very few policies out there. It doesn't have to be a big AI policy. It doesn't have to be a book, you know. It could just be a few pages, 2 or 3 pages, maybe even, just to guide your people so that they have that confidence to use AI in your organization. But that's lacking. And I feel that the guardrails aren't there. Once the guardrails are there with a bit more confidence, I think people will use it with more confidence. That's my thinking.
I think I have to agree, and it's interesting you mention about shadow AI, and I think that's terminology that's kind of, again, it's kind of become very commonplace. But when we talk about that, what do you mean when you say shadow AI?
Yeah, well, that's a good question as well, because of course, you would ask that because you're used to asking questions like this. But a lot of people just sort of assume things, don't they? And off they go, and they don't bother to qualify what the actual problem is before they start trying to solve it. But once you take that mindset to things, you do get a lot further, a lot more quickly. And shadow AI can be whatever it is that you think it is, obviously. But for me, shadow AI is where it's not being declared as being used. We know it's being used. It's clear your colleague is suddenly far more eloquent than they were before, and they're producing hopefully very good stuff, or maybe not such great stuff because they're not even bothering to read it. But one way or another, they're using tools that are not within the remit of the organ. I can't say the policy because I don't think many companies or organizations have policies, but
Mm.
not within what's stated as you should use. So, for example, it might be verbally, you might have been told, yes, you can use Copilot. You might have been issued with a license for which you've signed and done all the stuff that you've done in your organization as usual, probably online and digitally. But nevertheless, it's recognized that that's what you're meant to be using. But until a little while ago, of course, Copilot wasn't really terribly good. And it had lots of strengths. I mean, I love the way it can search across all the apps in my tenant, and it's fantastic, to be able to sort of just ask it a quick question like, have I got any outstanding decisions I need to make this week? This is before you sort of sign off on a Friday afternoon. And it's really, really reassuring for that. But it does miss stuff, so you can't check out completely. And so I would say, though, that if you are at least using the permitted AI, then the organization has a better chance of trying to track what is being used for the future. Because what are we going to do if everyone's just out there just using whatever they fancy using? I mean, the dangers are absolutely, well, they're obvious, aren't they?
Yeah, it's interesting because I was speaking to a sort of IT leader a few weeks ago, and they were talking about this is the first time where this is a really consistent problem in their organization. Like historically, we've always had the odd person who's using a bit of software that would really rather they didn't. But for the
Yeah.
first time now, they are dealing with the fact of a lot of this stuff isn't installed. It's cloud based. It's go to a website and use, and it's becoming this. They don't want to treat employees like children. So you don't want to go back to the world of we're going to block any non-work related websites. That's not ideal. We know this. We've been there before. But at the same time, there's this constant concern, and everyone looking to IT or cybersecurity to prevent this leak of intellectual property or customer data or whatever it might be, whilst you've got often well-meaning employees going, I'll be more productive for the business by just using Claude or ChatGPT or whatever, and I'll just put that spreadsheet in here. Because often it's almost so friendly looking on the outside that we forget what we're doing. And because we're so used to it not having these big ramifications or not being as readily available. And I appreciate what you say about the policy, but I'm really interested from an L&D and training perspective. Have you seen any organization really getting this right in terms of setting people up for success with AI rather than leaving them in this kind of somewhat Wild West situation?
Well, I've read about them because they're the larger businesses. So I've read about them and I've listened to podcasts where they talk about this. Yeah, but that is very much, they are the case studies that, the stuff that PR is made of, really. How genuinely they are being successful, I don't know. We'd have to go in and have a good look for ourselves, wouldn't we, Tom? But
Yes.
if you're asking me, have I seen successful transformations whereby you've got the whole, let's say you've started off with the organization having a decent budget, a good attitude towards it, some guardrails in place, and employees feel safe to use it. No, I haven't. I haven't seen that. And that's a shame, I think, because one thing I do see a lot, which is sadly happening increasingly with L&D, I think, is large organizations are saying, look, just train them, employees, to use the tools. Just to use the tools. That's it. We don't need anything else. We've got to get, we've got a budget, we've got a deadline. They need to be using these tools better. What's better? What do we mean by better? Anyway, what does good look like? That's a good place to start. We know this. It seems a bit boring, doesn't it, when you take it apart and you sort of think, well, it's so obvious, really. There's no magic wand. It's doing the hard miles. It's really is that, you've got to do that stuff. You've got to take it apart and you've got to say, look, we have to trust each other. We have to spend some time, which is going to cost some money, this, because people aren't going to come in at the weekend and do it for free. So we need to give them time to do it at work. They need to understand how important it is and how the business is behind it and what the purpose is of it. It's not just to save time so the company can save loads of money. I mean, that's, this efficiency trap that we get into, isn't it?
Absolutely. The comment there from Mark Woodman, 15 years ago, bring your own device to work was the problem for corporate IT. Absolutely. Like time shrinks all problems, right? We will look back, I suspect, in 30 years' time at this era of AI and we go, oh, that was simple. We're dealing with quantum computing now, or whatever the next big jump is after this stage of generative AI. But in the moment, it kind of still feels like this well, it is a big complicated mess for us, isn't it? It just won't be for
Yeah.
the next group of people to come along.
Yeah, we're doing all the hard work working it out, really. I can still remember those
Absolutely.
policies that said, BDYO or BYDO, whatever it was. And I can remember all those policies that said, don't bring them to work and don't use them and, don't go on social media and don't do all that. And now, of course, employees are positively encouraged to do so. There's been the big case by LinkedIn to establish who exactly owns the LinkedIn profile. And it is the individual themselves, not the organization. Quite rightly so. So, learning and development has got some of these things to go through, these challenges to go through, I think. My big worry is that we're missing out on innovation and we're not setting ourselves up for innovation. We are trying to shortcut this, to really come up with shortcuts and short circuit this, get through get to the winning post as quickly as possible. We don't even know what the winning post looks like at the moment, Tom, do
Mm.
we?
I guess that kind of goes back to something you mentioned earlier, which was attitude. And I'm
Yeah.
really interested in that because I think often, because AI is a technical thing, we jump to a very technical mindset about training. We think about how to click the buttons, what's the process, what do you input and what do you don't, the do's, the don'ts, the examples. But you mentioned attitude as one of those things that was really important that you wanted to see in someone who was doing this well. What do when you say about like the right attitude, what do you think that is?
I think, do you mean as a user?
Yeah, or I mean, even at an organizational level, is there a difference? Is there an attitude that we're trying to breed in our users? Is there an organizational attitude or viewpoints that we want to adopt?
Well, people are, they're programmed, aren't they, to get on, and that's why we are an apex predator really on the planet. And we can't underestimate that. We are going to take shortcuts. We are going to game things sometimes if we see an opportunity because it suits our purpose to get on, as I say. But if the organization itself is rewarding that, then everybody's going to join in. And that's a big problem. So we need to be rewarding the right attitudes. And the right attitude, it might be different for different organizations, but the right attitude is whatever you say it is. For me, I would have thought it would have been people who were, first of all, understanding what the business objectives were. What are we trying to achieve as an organization? That's what you're being paid to do, to come in and try and achieve those objectives. And then to say, okay, what skills do we need to be able to achieve those objectives? And saying AI just is just crazy. That's like saying you need to be able to breathe, or whatever. It's just crazy. Or write or read or something. AI is massive, isn't it? So like electricity, I know I've made that analogy before. And it's like electricity. It's going to become part of the systems that we use. It's just going to be part of our infrastructure very quickly. We won't be coming into work saying, oh, let's have some training on AI. We'll be saying, let's have some training on something like it that would be a subcategory of using that AI. That's what will be important to us. And we will, I think, less and less be suspicious of it, and we'll embrace it more. But then probably not. If there's going to be big scandals, and scandals sell newspapers, and people, it stops the scroll of doom, doesn't it? When it says, hey, stop, look at this disaster. I'm an optimist, Tom, so I'm hoping the right attitude will win out.
Absolutely. I guess one of the things that strikes me there is there's a lot in there that L&D's familiar with about alignment. Whenever we're creating any kind of intervention, and everyone in the chat will be familiar with this because I talk about it almost every session, is this idea of aligning everything we do to a real business objective. And I think
Yes, yes.
often at the minute when I speak to teams and I ask, what's your top priority? And they'll go, oh, AI adoption. I worry a little bit that that's the top priority, but it's fine. It's like that should be part of other priorities, surely not its own thing. But there we go. If that's the priority, that's the priority. The question for me is always, okay, so what for? What are we trying to achieve? Because if you just
Yes,
want people to adopt AI, amazing. Tell them that they'll do stuff. It'll be
yes,
awful, but they'll do stuff.
they'll do
Um,
stuff.
but if realistically in most organizations, let's be honest, it's we want to increase profitability, or we want to decrease risk in this area, or we want to be more productive in this area, or whatever it might be. There will be like hard objectives within the organization that they're wanting to harness AI to achieve. And it's being able, I think, to draw those lines, because so many employees and businesses that are being told to use AI right now. And I've got family members in this situation that are doing, interesting jobs, like they're a postman or whatever. And they're going, hit this AI. And he's like, how is this going to help me? Because no one has explained, oh, well, actually, it's speeding up this little bit of the process, which en masse across the 500 letters you're delivering, or however many, whatever it is, that's going to save this much time or make it this much more efficient or whatever it might be. That explanation has not been given. And
And what's
therefore,
in it for me as well is really
yes,
important, isn't it?
yes,
Really important.
absolutely.
And
Because,
that's where you get, I mean, when you start to really break it down, I mean, I talk about jobscaping. Don't bother looking it up, anybody. It's not in the dictionary. It's something I've come up with myself. But it's like landscaping, but for work. So when my clients are a bit concerned about it, they'll come to me and they'll say, we don't know where to start. What do we start with? We've got lots of confidence about using AI, but we don't know where to start and what to start using it for. So I said, okay, well, look at the tasks that you've got. Just break it down. I know it's boring, but you've got to start somewhere. And that means look at the tasks you do. You could break down making a cup of tea, for goodness sake, couldn't you? And it involves certain steps. Well, what are the steps? So don't try and do this. Somebody once said to me, don't try the Death Star project, which I love that. Yeah, don't start with the Death Star project. Start with a little one, an easy one, and start with something small, break it down into some tasks, and then decide which ones you're willing to give to AI completely. Just delegate them. That might be putting the kettle on, for example. It doesn't take a human to introduce their own nuance and judgment to that. It's enough that it's just click a switch, it goes on. And then after that, if you speak to anybody in Yorkshire, which isn't a million miles from where I live, they'll tell you there's quite a lot of human judgment involved in making a cup of tea. So I'm not going to get into that too much. But I will say that there will be, in those tasks, there will be things in that's zone 1 for me. That's zone 1. So you've delegated it completely. Then you've got zone 2, where you're saying, okay, well, actually, we could collaborate here. And the human is really collaborating with the AI on the basis that the AI is adding something to their perception of a situation or how they can fulfill it. So we could call it brainstorming, if you like. It's a great brainstorming partner. That's an example of it. Another thing it's really good at doing is joining the dots. So seeing patterns, and if you're thinking, scratching your head thinking, I wonder why that conversation went that way, you can actually put it through AI, give it the clues, and it will join the dots for you and see a different perspective. So those are great things. And then zone 3, those are your AI is not going anywhere near these things. These are human only areas. So that's a great way to start. And you don't need to buy anything fancy. A pen and a piece of paper will help you do that.
And I think this is the stage that often I find is being missed. We're starting with the purchase quite often. We've decided we're all going to have ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, whether it's an LLM, whether it's a different program or whatever it is. And then we're trying to figure out where to use it. Instead of,
Yes.
as you say, really thinking about, so hang on, my job, what tasks do I actually fulfill in my job? And how do these things break down? I'm really interested on that basis. A lot of our audience obviously is L&D practitioners, and I noticed that a lot of the comments from when I said, what did you last use AI for, are creating a reference guide, putting together session ideas for an upcoming training event, creating a management training presentation. It's content. We're creating content with AI.
Yes.
And I'd love in the chat, talk to me a little bit about how you use AI to create content, because creating content with AI is not always as simple as throw a prompt in and use what it spits out. Sometimes it might be, sometimes it might not. I'd love to hear how you're using it. Carolyn, when you're, or do you use, I guess, first of all, do you use AI to create content pieces? And what does that process look like for you?
Yes, I do. And I think that this is a really interesting point because actually, Tom, I think that I was speaking with someone this morning about she's very much got a background very similar to my own. We're very tech oriented. We could talk to tech, seriously tech people, but we couldn't do their job, if you know what I mean. So yeah, so we can have that conversation. But we were both saying that the problem is that we don't actually, as when we start working with AI, we don't really break it down into what it's going to be good at doing. For us personally, we tend to sort of look at it blanket. Oh, what can it do? What can it do? And then we get really afraid because we think it's going to take that away from me. And I actually really like doing that. Now, this a colleague of mine, she really likes writing. She loves writing. And so she would not want to give writing to AI, although of course it would be brilliant at it, but she doesn't want to train it to use her voice because she doesn't think that that's appropriate, and she just loves writing. Now for me, I'm like, well, I do like writing, but I'm afraid I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and in the end I just end up, oh gosh, huffing and puffing for so long, over sweating actually over an email before I send it, if I didn't have AI to help me with it. And that process of just sending emails out has become so much easier and actually much more persuasive and successful, I find, than when I was crafting my own. So find what you're good at, keep it to yourself, even if it's something that AI does really, really well. I wouldn't give it away.
I think that's really important because there's different ways of using AI in content creation, and I definitely do use it 100%, but not for everything. You mentioned writing. I'm on the team of I love writing. I think it's something that you can relax into even when you're writing for work. Doesn't mean I never use AI. What I'll often do is if I'm just writing for like my Substack or for the pleasure of writing, there's no need to. That's fine. If I'm writing for like a piece of training material, my approach tends to be that I will still write the training material as I always have, but then I will put it into usually Claude for me and say, here is the persona of the people that I am training for that audience. Is this right? What have I missed? What considerations might you add in? It's a phenomenal, almost like I always call it like a prickly editor. I want it to be like the anti me when I go, oh, everyone will know that, and it goes, actually, you'll find most people don't know that, or you've assumed this,
Yeah,
or that writing's actually just really bad, which does happen, um, and in an
absolutely.
empty room, you're never going to catch it yourself.
No, you're not. I quite agree. And I work a lot on my own. So I don't even have the opportunity to share it with other people before I publish something. But I do use AI more for the brainstorming, for the ideas. I like to use it for that. And that's where I have to be really careful because it can, of course, well, I was going to say it can hallucinate, but it can well, completely make this up. I think lie sounds like it's a malicious sort of intentional thing, whereas
Yeah.
really what it's doing is just filling a gap, isn't it? And coming up with whatever it thought would be appropriate. And it might not have been. It made a woman up once for me. And I was like, oh my God, I nearly published that this woman was head of some massive corporation. And I thought, I better just look at these videos fully. And I looked at them and I thought, that person looks familiar, but not by this name. Who's that? So anyway, it wasn't. It was a made up. And I said, have you made this up? Oh, yes, yes. Nice catch, Carolyn. Everyone will know that one. Good catch, or whatever. Good for pushing back.
And I think that's an important thing there when we're using this in content creation is to understand that that's how the system works, right? Like I
Yes.
always say, we have modeled it almost too much to try and be like the human brain. We find patterns, we look for them, we fill gaps in, although we don't like to admit that we do it. Oh no, the human brain is far superior. It would never do that. It's like we're pretty good at just filling gaps in with what we
We do
think the
that.
case is. Um, but this does exactly the same thing, right? If it can't find what you're looking for, it will often go, ah, yes, well, this thing, I've invented something for you. Have at it.
It just
And
sounds
that
so
is what it's designed to do.
authoritative, doesn't it?
Yes.
That's the thing. And just there, Tom, you just made me think of something, which it only dawned on me really the other day, as these things do when you stop for time to think about things. And I thought, oh, this person was absolutely right when someone else was criticizing AI and saying, oh, and of course it's just, as a lot of techies will, they'll say it's only predicting the next word, you'll hear that. Well, actually, that's what humans are doing all the time. Our brains are predicting the next word. And I suddenly realized that as you open your mouth to speak, you don't actually, unless you've rehearsed as an actor, you don't know what you're going to say, which is rather extraordinary, isn't it?
And this, again, I guess this is one of those moments where it's kind of like it took me a while to think about this, but I think the reason we find some of this so unnerving is the fact that for many of us, it's the first time we're being forced to reflect on questions like what is consciousness? And
Yes.
what makes something real and not. Like people who are into philosophy will have spent their entire careers thinking about this and go, "Oh, old questions, whatever,
That's
get
not
a grip."
yeah.
Most of us normal people are for the first time going, "Oh, I have no idea how to think about this,"
Yes.
and that's
So
quite
true.
uncomfortable. And it's the reason why I agree with you that the idea that no training or no change management is required for this is like I don't think we need to train people how to use, in a literal sense, ChatGPT. for instance. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
chatbot. We're all pretty familiar.
No.
But how to use it, when to use it, how to use the outputs effectively and safely, this is kind of prime material for training. It's
Yeah.
where we should be going. There's our value. When we say where's the value of our industry right now, how about in not filling the work world with? Well, I'm not a huge fan of the term AI slop. I think it's a bit too broad. But for want of a
Yeah.
better term, AI generated rubbish that will cause huge compliance problems or data leaks. This is prime L&D territory. This is compliance training, really. If we took AI out of it, this would be just core compliance training.
Well, that's absolutely right. And if you start to think about what will the jobs of the future be for L&D, it becomes really fascinating. And I think that, and these are the questions that you've just mentioned. You know, these are more to do with different disciplines that we haven't really thought about a lot. And as we start to think about them, we can, or even if we do it the other way around, you start to think about what you're going to do with your career. If you want to be an L&D, what are you going to do with it? Well, you're probably not going to be a content designer for a long time unless you're managing lots of bots that are doing the work on your behalf, and you might be the Uber content designer, head honcho. Okay, but there will be jobs which are created around needing to understand token consumption, for example. That's going to be quite a big thing. I know it's only part of, you're not going to just sort of suddenly become the person who understands token uh, uh, consumption, but you will need to understand it as part of your training and part of your skill of delivering, because, as we said, it has to be aligned with what the business needs, and the business needs viable, value-driven solutions, not things that are going to cost an absolute fortune. And actually, Claude Cowork has driven it home to me, Tom, about the cost of tokens and consumption. I used to be one of those people, those jolly happy people who was just suiting myself, devil may care, rabbiting on to ChatGPT and Claude and anybody else that would stand still long enough, or anything else that would stand still long enough. And of course, Copilot, because I did use it a lot. And now I've discovered that I keep coming up against this warning sign. Ah, time to get a coffee, Carolyn. You've run out of tokens. Would you like to buy some more to keep going, or will you be back at, I don't know, 4 p.m. or whatever? And it's usually a couple of hours. I was thinking, oh, fed up with this. Now I've been told that because I'm on the $20 a month, you know, level, which I suppose a lot of people are on that price band. And the next one up is $100 a month, isn't it? Which is massive. It's a huge leap, but for people like you and me, Tom, it's probably the case that we are wasting quite a bit of money on some other things, and we can't use them all the time. And we probably would say, I won't say wasting, but spending quite a lot of money on others. So you've got your Gemini, you've got your Perplexity and your Copilot and all these other ones that you're using in ChatGPT. So probably Anthropic has thought to itself, well, we'll have some of that, quite useful. Because if you do spring for the $100 a month, I'm told, even if you're a developer, you just basically never touch the sides. So that's the difference, I think.
It's
And here,
interesting. Yeah, that's what we've done at Evolve. We consolidated everything into Claude, and now Adobe used to be the bill that I cried about, not anymore. But hey, it's staffing and then Anthropic, but that's it.
yes,
Um,
that's
but
it.
but by consolidating, yeah, we've not found it to be cheaper, but we have found that if you're going to use these tools and if you're going to make them part of like a core workflow, unsurprisingly, you can't work that well at a $20 a month bracket. We've found
Yeah.
once you try to actually create things, like you say, you burn through it so quickly, you start getting blockers in your workflow, and I think that's that experience of almost like consumer AI is where I think things are quite different, because most organizations, I would hope, are not buying into $20 a month sort of
One
packages.
would hope
If
not.
you would definitely hope not. If you're suffering with that in your employment, speak to your manager, because that's not reasonable. On the
Yeah,
note
but
of specific
yeah.
tools, though, we do have a question. Amy's asked, "What's our view on tools like Synthesia?" So this, I'm going to broaden it from one brand, Synthesia, out to AI video content and maybe AI voice as well, because it's all very kind of intermixed. Carolyn, what are your thoughts? What have you seen from that space?
Presumably, that means what do we think of it for the purpose of learning and development? Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for a start, one has to just acknowledge that they are brilliant technologies and that they are coming on leaps and bounds. And apart from the fact that they do seem to do this a lot, sitting by a desk, and just so that you know that they are actually meant to be human, they are moving their arms and their shoulders a lot, which is a bit unnerving. But I'm sure they'll get over that soon. It, I personally. Don't really. I think there's a big yearning for real now, and I think that's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So I think that's going to be their challenge. That would be my answer.
Mm. Our cards on the table. I worked for one of these companies for 6 months, so I'll put my cards on the table. I was very hopeful about this technology. I thought it was going to be a real opener of the use of video in L&D. Which it sounds very basic, but there are so many organisations that still don't do video. I'll speak to them. They'll go, "Oh, then if something changes, we've got to remake it." And I thought, well, this is the fix for that. This is fantastic. Interestingly, there's a lot of research coming out that that gap between very realistic and human is technically tiny, but in terms of how we perceive it and feel it, vast.
Yes.
There's also, we kind of have to almost back to basics, back to Mayer's multimedia principles. Do we need the person speaking to be on screen? No. So are avatars actually the right way to go, or is it more voice over slides? Would that be a more effective way? In terms of effectiveness, I've seen that have much more uptake and success than I have with avatar-based videos. Whereas before,
Yeah.
I, as an instructional designer, might just sit with a microphone and record myself over the top of some slides. Now it's just tap, 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 in it goes, and off it goes. And there's going to be lots of different views about that and kind of careers like voice acting and things like that. In most organizations, that was never going out to a voice actor. That was some instructional designer like me grabbing a microphone, not very
Yes.
professionally, and recording it, because there was no way the business was going to pay for a studio time and a real artist to do that. So
No,
I don't
unfortunately.
feel particularly bad about that. I've got to be honest. That's my gut feeling at the moment, is how that's going to go. The research seems to back that avatars are not yet realistic enough to get over that gap, and even then, again, headshot videos are not wildly effective from a learning
No,
perspective.
not
So
really.
it,
Not
like they can be.
I think when we've got other things that are fascinating me at the moment on
Yeah.
those lines, like simulation. I mean, I think simulation's fascinating, and I'm wondering whether or not it's going to be capable. This is the first time I've actually said this out loud to anybody, so it might sound ridiculous when I say it, but if it's going to be capable of helping those younger people who would come into their career, into the early career roles, which we know are suffering, much more rapidly than ordinary roles are being disrupted, then will it help them to overcome that career gap, that ladder gap, which is being removed between early career start and middle management? Can simulation actually help them to, if you're not going to execute on something and you're not going to learn by doing in the real world, if you like, can simulation somehow become that real world? I don't know. It'd be interesting.
Yeah, I mean it's fascinating because and this maybe goes speaks to kind of a big training point, which is role plays. Like anyone who
Yes.
delivers training knows the value of role play, and we also know
Yes.
that everyone hates it. It's
Do they
always
hate
been the
it?
case. No,
Yeah.
the moment if you're in a room of 20 people, go, we're going to do role plays to practice the skills. Everyone goes, oh no,
Oh,
because
oh no,
because
I hate role play, they say, don't they? Oh, not me, you go first. Yeah.
it's a bit weird and embarrassing, right? To then pretend that there's someone else in front of you and get feedback afterwards. I actually think moving that to the digital world might
Yeah.
be like it will never be a true replacement for a human to human conversation. But if that's not available at all, which 9 times out of 10, given the scaling problems, given the human kind of embarrassment factor in the room is not made available because more and more training teams just don't even bother trying because it's too much of an uphill battle to persuade people to do role plays. Then I think it would be a really good fix. There are some early versions out today. They're early versions, it's a first gen technology, a lot of that stuff. But I do think, having had a play with some of them, that they have a tremendous potential. And admittedly, I hadn't thought
Oh,
about that early careers. A lot of the stuff that I'm seeing is kind of conversations with senior leaders, difficult
oh,
conversations,
oh,
those kinds of things.
yes,
And I guess
yes,
that's 'cause there's a lot of money at the top of a business, right?
yeah.
That kind of makes
No
sense
one's
for an early product.
completely transfixed
Um,
by leadership. Yeah.
yeah, but to use that at early stage, and especially when we think about I've got a bit of a thing that I think the next 10 years is going to be incredibly difficult because we're going to have the COVID impacted generations coming into the workforce in
Yes.
more and
Yeah.
more numbers. And
Yeah.
they have lost out on so much of that
Absolutely.
interpersonal training. Could,
100%. Yeah.
could this be something that we could use to help them? Because right now, I worry that we are not prepared to give them the support they need,
Well,
which is
someone
quite
said to me
concerning.
the other day, and I've not even thought about it, and I've no idea if it's true. People will make their own mind up, but that the younger generation that you're talking about there, Tom, who suffered with COVID and had to be in a lot more indoors than we were, perhaps as young people at that age, um, they are feeling very nervous and anxious out in public spaces. So that's why they wear headsets when they're walking. That's why they're constantly on their phones when they're in public places. I don't know if it's true. I don't know if there's any research to show that it is, but it sounds logically it could be supported.
Yeah, I think there's a lot we're going to have to understand about this. My concern is that it will get hand waved off as this generation.
Yes,
Um,
it has been to date, hasn't it?
and that yeah I'm seeing signs, like, admittedly I'm seeing signs at conferences, webinars, podcasts, but these tend to be the precursors to wider thought within a few years.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I'm hopeful that we might realize that that's not what this is, and that we
yeah,
should have a big role to play. When people
yes,
talk about wanting to do good in their role, this is probably one of the biggest opportunities in my career that will come up, to be like, this is a group of people who are going to need support beyond here's your
yes.
GDPR training. They're gonna really need some help here. Um, so, and yeah, I
I
think
think
this
that's
technology
right.
could be an opportunity.
Yeah, and we do know on your point earlier about the dislike of role play with another human or human to human. We do know the statistics are that people feel very comfortable talking to chatbots. We know this from interviews, for example, and also I would say that so you can scale interviews, can't you? Because you can have a bot, interviewing a person, and they're less biased in the sense, as long as they're programmed correctly, they're less biased and they don't fatigue and so forth, and their expectations don't change. But one of the things that I think we probably have missed about uh, the I know people are very quick to go out and buy something and buy some technology that can do it, but you can set Chat GPT up on your phone and you can do a role play with it on the voice command. Just
Mhm.
as simple as that. Just tell it you are whoever it's meant to be. You're interviewing me for this, or you're going to give me some tips about how I could improve my delivery of Shakespearean tragedies or whatever it might be. And it will, won't it? And it's pretty good. I mean, I know it's not been specifically configured for that, but it can be quite good.
Absolutely. And I mean, you can even build very basic versions of this in your existing authoring tools. If you're sat there thinking, well, we've got to build everything into Storyline or Evolve or whatever, with a little bit of work, with some basic JavaScript that you can even ask Claude or ChatGPT to write for you. Look at that, it's bringing
Yes,
more in.
yeah,
And an API access to 11 Labs, even at a very cost-effective option for some voice. You can create a voice-to-voice interaction like that in any e-learning, or pretty much any e-learning authoring tool that
yes.
supports JavaScript and APIs. So you don't have to buy into a huge shiny new product. You
Well, I've
can
done it
start
before.
simple.
Yeah, I've done it. I've had to do it on a shoestring because I'm bootstrapping this patent pending shift signals that I've got, and that I've had it's sort of a bit lickety split, to be honest, to begin with, and showing it to one or two people that are like, "Oh, this looks good," measuring the measuring the holy grail, if you like, going from going from qualitative to quantitative assessment of learning. What is learning? Is it going from just from purely intake of information to moving to the next stage of actually understanding and being able to demonstrate the understanding by applying that new learning to new situations and scenarios?
Mm.
I couldn't possibly, as anybody could have really imagined how we would do that without generative AI. So I did that using, it was simply a GPT at the time. And then, of course, when it got a bit more legs and people got interested, I'm still looking for partners who are interested in doing some trials, because I just want field trials. I don't even know if it works yet, Tom. I don't know if it might not work. I mean, I think it works, but we've only done little trials yet. But so we've had to build a demo that's a bit more robust. So yes, I have got a web designer involved, of course, now. But it hasn't changed the process. The process is identical. It's just that it's a bit more of a Death Star project than it was. So I need them to be able to think about API integrations and stuff, which I probably couldn't think about with Claude. Claude just wasn't going to think it through for me, you know. But
And
yeah, it's not difficult.
but I think what you touched on there, and Jay, I've seen your question about Claude Design. We'll come to that in a moment, because that's a good question. Knowing where the boundaries of where the tool can get you are is quite important, I've found. And part of that's been discovery, because it will confidently say it can get you there, of course, but then
Yeah,
will struggle. So do you now, or how have you gone about understanding, when can you rely on the tool and when do you need to bring in a person with expertise? How do you
yeah.
think about that?
Well, I can tell you that's trial and error, Tom, because I'm just like the next person. I fall for that confident, hurrah, Carolyn, this is going to be great. I can show you how to do that. Let's do that together another Sunday down the Swanee, because I think by the time I spent about 10 hours trying to crunch it, I think, look, just another hour, and I'll get there. And it has this annoying habit, doesn't it, of saying, oh, that was the problem. I've spotted it. Don't worry, I've got it now. And it hasn't. So I think you get to that point where you're out of your depth. And this is why we'll always need experts in my life. As you enter your area of expertise, as your audience does, and as I do, we have that, what do you call it, the sniff test. Does it pass the sniff test? And you can know immediately when you look at something because you're an expert in it. And this is going to be the problem for the younger generation coming through, that they won't have had that experience doing the hard yards, getting that experience of executing on tasks and learning really by doing. And I think that's, although you've got your world models now with, so Dr. Fei Li with her world models and things like that she's developing that wonderful platform, which will help AI to understand spatial differences. And no, it's not the same as electric cars, as I have found out by doing countless sort of brainstorming sessions with Claude and so forth. But it's not the same. It's very different. I've educated myself on that. You have to when you live in the middle of Lincolnshire, Tom. There's nobody else to turn to except the dog. And, so if you've ever tried to invent something with AI that has been reliant on real world products, it doesn't have a clue. I gave it a watering can and an orange fluffy cushion. I told it, I said, here are two items, create a third novel item with these two. And it came up with what could sound quite sensible at first, and that was a watering can seat, garden seat. Right, sounds quite sensible. When it started to talk about it, it was very clear it would never work because the handle for the watering can was in the way, so people couldn't sit on it and see each other. And then when I started to point these things out, it started to kind of like, oh, it's okay, let's put some wheels on it, let's do this, let's do that. It got more and more ridiculous. So you need your experts because they can immediately cut through all that. No human would have ever thought that was going to work, and that's the difference, really.
Absolutely. So we're down to our last 10 minutes. So if you've got any burning questions in the chat, now's the time to get them in there. There was a quick one about Claude Design, obviously brand new, good example of how tools can just kind of arrive one morning. have you had a look at it at all yet, Carolyn? Have you dived into Claude Design?
No, I haven't. I'd be very interested to know how that's working for people.
Yeah, let us know how you've got on, Jay, and what you've used it for. Seems pretty impressive. I must admit,
Yeah.
I got very excited because I despise creating slide decks. It's like the job that I hate. Whenever come and do a talk, so do I have to bring slides? Yes, it's like no. So I thought, I'll never have to design slides again. Fed it my brand stuff, gave it the script for one of my talks. It spat out a slide deck that is best described as never to be seen by more human eyes. Was immediately deleted, and I'll try again later. So I think it's like any tool, it's going to be iteration based, right? But it's certainly not a magic bullet, not yet, anyway. But
And
I
anyway,
agree,
there
impressive
are
with it.
others, aren't there? I mean, there's Notebook LM, which I absolutely love. Google's Notebook LM can produce a really great looking slide deck, very serious, very grown up looking one. And if you're into a bit more fun, then I think Gamma.app is brilliant as well. So
Yeah,
you can
yes,
use those. But yeah, I'm definitely going to have a look at Claude Design. So thank you for that.
absolutely. One thing I did find was that will make a dent in your tokens. Like it goes for them.
Oh,
but
okay.
but
Yes, of
yes,
course.
it kind of makes
Yeah.
sense.
Just to say that I worked out, I was so curious, why is it costing so much and why are the others not charging at this rate? I don't know
Mm,
why the others aren't, but I know what it's doing. And it does actually develop best practice. And this is something that L&D practitioners will, I'm sure, will be required to understand. And that is that every time you submit another question in a thread, in line on Claude or any AI chat, it reads the whole thread again, including any attachments, because it doesn't have memory, and this is why there's such a big push to improve memory for these chatbots. So yeah, and that's the same whether it's chatbot or it's an agent or it's whatever you're doing. So yeah, so that's the problem. So all the time, as often as you can, ask it for a summary and tell it you're going to a new chat, and then go to a new chat.
absolutely. So I think in our last few minutes, it would be great if we could think about, when often I think what we're talking about is questions we need to ask ourselves, things we need to consider. So I'm wondering, Carolyn, from your perspective, when we're faced with the opportunity or the potential of being able to use AI, what are the main questions that you would suggest that we ask ourselves before diving in or buying the tool or throwing ourselves into usage?
Well, it would definitely be, is there a free version? Because then you can have a little play around with it and find out what it does. Because I do think, well, you might not even know what it does yet. But then once you do know what it does, I'd ask yourself, do you need to do that thing? Do you want to do that thing? Have you got time to do that thing? I discover lots of things on my journeys, as I'm sure we all do, that I just have to park and think, no, I don't have time to even use that. It looks great, but it's not going to be practical. So intentionality is absolutely critical. And this is something that Jobscaping talks about a lot, because you need to be intentional. I think time, this is going to be something that I am really would like to leave with the audience with today, is that your time, your attention time is going to become the new um, the new currency. Your attention, where do you place your attention? Because it's going to become a very scarce commodity, attention.
I think that we're already kind of seeing that in the world, aren't we? Is that so much of what the internet is, so much of even our own practice, how do we hold people's attention to a learning experience? For a
Yeah.
long time, we've been talking about kind of, yeah, the workplace used to be so locked down, so closed that no one else had anything else to look at. Now people work from home. Now people work. I had someone the other day saying, "Oh, I'm struggling to engage with this training. I'm out for my run trying to do the training." You're like, "Oh,
What?
that is not a use case that I have ever considered." Um, but that clearly that is the world we now live in. So,
Yes. Yeah.
we have to, I think, really broaden our idea of the considerations we have around attention. So I think that's a really, really great point.
Yeah,
Say,
because our families as well are entitled to quite a bit of attention as
mm,
well, and so we do need to have that human time, not just time that we spend with screens. Yeah.
Absolutely. So if anyone's got any last minute questions, now is the time to throw them in. Thank you for being so engaged. I know there are tons of tools that everyone's sort of excited to talk about. Please do use the comments of this for that conversation. Engage, share ideas. If you've got examples or demos, I agree. Tim Slade's demo of Claude Design will be fantastic. Tim always does really great, sort of really incredibly quick demos of things. They come out and he's got a demo. It's very impressive.
The attention
Um,
again, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And Carolyn, if people want to connect with you, learn more from you, where can they do that?
Well, they can join, they can find me on LinkedIn always, and I always reply to DMs, but as long as it's not a pitch slap, as they say. And also Substack. I know it's for HR, but actually it's for an HR community. But there's a lot in common between HR and L&D at the moment. There's an awful lot more than we realize. And I think it's a time probably that we are actually redefining our roles to some extent. And so I'm exploring some of that as well, which might be useful on Substack. That's the Sovereign Career Hub.
Absolutely. Well, I've dropped a link to your LinkedIn in the chat. People can connect with
Thank
you
you.
there and find their way to the Sovereign Careers stuff there. I really would recommend the Substack. If you're not on Substack, you should be on Substack in general. It's great,
Yeah.
long form thought,
Yes.
not kind of like 3-line LinkedIn posts with a big picture of someone on holiday underneath. It's a good place, especially around AI, actually, for that slightly less rapid pace of thinking, for that step back and go, I wonder, which is
Yes.
definitely, I think, what we need slightly more of. Well, thank you, Carolyn, for taking the time out of your day to come and chat with us today. It's been really, really interesting. Thank you, everyone, for joining us as well. Really appreciate. Oh, we've got a few minutes. Yeah, well, why not? What about open claw style solutions that apparently help people manage their lives and be an AI personal assistant? Ooh, this is
Yeah.
almost stepping out of as the kind of L&D world, but interesting potentially. Carolyn, your thoughts?
Well, I just recently entered a competition called Agent Madness, and there were quite a few of those in there. So I were of those style of bots and AI agents. So I would suggest you take a look at that. You can find it on the web, Agent Madness. They haven't finished voting yet, so they haven't got a winner yet. But I did get through to the next round, which was really good. Yes, but so I would say lots of people are very interested in that. So it's worth having a look.
Fantastic. Well, as I was saying, thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Thank you for being so active in the chat, everyone. And if you've got any follow-up questions, please do reach out. We're always more than happy to field them. Our session next month will be focusing on what was next on the list of priorities for small and medium businesses in the survey, which was leadership development. Interesting interplay there between all this change and AI coming in and the need for great leadership. And I'm really pleased to be able to say we'll have Kathy Hoy joining us for that session. So, without further ado, let's finish this one. Thank you so much. We'll see you next month. And in the meantime, try and experiment with something new and AI related between now and next time, and let us know at the start of the next session what you got up to. Thanks, everyone. See you next month. Bye.